shapes that we had created. And then we also have a few that I have already created that are slightly more refined shapes for some of these things. So one thing that I still want to go over with you about these rotoscopes, especially this one in particular, this one right here, is how to set up the rotoscope settings here for your output, your pre-multiplication, and that type of thing. We talked about that a little bit when we did the far left formation as far as leaving the output as alpha. We do want to have it pre-multiplied, however, with the RGBA. So let's actually jump over back to our 3D space and let's look at that card. Select it, hit the 1 key, and you can see it looks very nice, just kind of all alphaed out there. You just see, you know, the outline of that shape. And we've got this shape over here that we're looking at in 2D space, this little bit. We haven't put it on a card yet, but the settings are going to be the same as far as output set to alpha, pre-multiply set to RGBA, and then you can see that the background is being cut away in 2D space. We will need a pre-mult node, so I can just select that, hit Control C, Control V, and plug that in there. And then once we get that set onto a piece of geometry, it'll already be pre-multiplied and ready. However, what do you do whenever you have a rotoscope with shapes that are inside of it? Well, it's easiest to tell what to do if you look at the alpha channel. So let's go ahead, clear our properties bin. We'll open back up that Roto 2, and let's go in. Instead of looking at our RGBA, we'll look at just A, and you can see that the alpha channel looks pretty good as far as this area here has been made to be transparent, but these little rotoscopes that we've added are still opaque. They're not going to be transparent. So we need to go in and select the ones that we've created besides the first one. So I'll just shift select all of those because we know the first one we created was the main outline and all the others are those little inside pieces. And we need to go into their color settings here. So I'll just select that, and that's going to bring up roto2.color, and all we have to do is turn the alpha channel down to transparent for those. So the alpha channel was set to 1, we're going to turn that down to 0, and now when we're looking at the alpha channel, I mean, you could see that live update where that just turned all the way down, and now we can see through it, and those areas will be transparent, all done within the same roto shape. So if you're creating a rotoscope that you want those little inside pieces to be transparent, you just have to go into the color and turn it down to 0 for that alpha setting. Now, what I'd like to do is plug in my other roto nodes here, and we've got a lot of them kind of already isolated out here for us. And I want to begin using those. They're just really the same thing that we were doing, just a little bit more refined masking. Really took my time trying to make those perfect for you guys. And just because I know you don't want to watch me rotoscoping for hours and hours, we'll go back to our RGB. And then let's go ahead and grab these two. This pre-mult node, we'll use that somewhere else for sure. And then I'm just going to disconnect those other 3 we had over here. Just kind of doing a little bit of housekeeping. And then let's go ahead and take a look at these. So we'll close out of that Roto 2. We've got this background left, so you can see I really took my time, went in here and got this looking very perfect. But this area, this edge here, not as necessary to do that. This one over here, I'm just going to go over to the next one, hit the 1 key. The background right, we'll open that up. You can see this is kind of similar to what I did, just very quick and sort of sloppy type of rotoscope, but it's fastest to do it this way, and it's really going to serve us the best in the end. We've got the small cliff face. So I did go ahead and create a little rotoscope just for this area here. We'll be able to use a roto paint node to grab some of this information and cover up that area, because each individual roto node is going to feed into a card that we'll be using in our rotoscope. So if we put a roto paint node between the background and the roto node that's isolating that, we almost can get a little slightly different version of this image every time that's feeding into that roto node. Now we still will need to go in and change our pre-multiply settings for all of these. So we'll be able to do that in a moment. Now this one, you can see I really went in, again, got all of those pieces of railing set up. But one thing that's important to see here is that I allowed this one to overlap with the path. And part of the reason I did that is because later when we start getting these cards set up, this is going to be one of the more challenging pieces to get set up in 3D space. So it's a little bit easier and nicer to have more than less. So we can stick with that, see how it works for us. If we need to adjust it later on, that is easy to do. Now the next one, you can see this encompasses all of this area over here, but it includes the railing. So you might be saying, well, that's strange. We already rotoscoped that out before. But what we'll need to do, again, as I was saying, is add a roto paint node, and we'll need to cover up all of this railing area because of the way that it's going to parallax. And that's going to become a lot more clear once we get these plugged into our 3D pieces of geometry. And then, of course, we have our little walking path there. So all in all, that is 7 pieces, all to kind of identify the different parts that we've got in our image here. And those are going to give us the look of some real life footage, which is pretty great. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some of these plugged into different types of geometry. So what I'm going to do is add pre-mult nodes to all of these. So I'll just go ahead and hit Control C and then hit Control V, let's see, 5 times. Because we need them for all of our roto nodes to look correct with the 3D geometry that we'll be adding. Okay, and we can come in and kind of straighten that up here in a moment. We just want to get this looking good for now. So we've got our background left. So which one is that? This one right here. I think this is going to look really nice wrapped onto a cylinder. So this one, I'm going to add a cylinder, and we'll just plug that right into the pre-mult node. And before we even look at this in 3D space, I'm just going to get a few more pieces of geometry in here so we can see how they relate to one another. Let's also do our walking path. So that's going to be this one right here. That's a pretty flat piece, so we could do that on a card. Another way to get to your geometry besides just hitting tab and typing in what kind of geometry you want is coming over here to that little geometry icon, going to geometry, and you can see we've got card, cube, cylinder, sphere. So I'm going to use a card for this one. And you can see that automatically bumped me over to 3D space. I do need that plugged into the pre-mult node though. You can kind of see the difference we get whenever that's not plugged in properly. And also this particular piece, again, we need to be pre-multiplied by the RGBA. And there we are. We're looking at this piece right there. Okay, so you can kind of see that little difference we get there. So let's go ahead and let's look at the right formation. If we come back to our 2D view, I'll just select that node, hit the 1 key. You can see that's this piece here. Again, I think this one's probably going to work better on a card. So I can just actually grab this card, hit Control C, Control V, and connect that into a card. Then our railing for this one, again, another card is in order. That's a very straight sort of piece. And then we've got our small cliff face. Again, another card's going to work for us on that. So we'll hit Control C, Control V for that little guy. And then we've got our 2 background pieces, which is this and this. I think those are going to work better on cylinders. So we've already got one cylinder. Let's just copy and paste that cylinder there. And this piece over here, I put on a card initially to show you, but I would like to switch it out with a cylinder. I feel like that's going to work better being projected onto a cylinder. So let's grab our cylinder and we will project it onto a cylinder instead. Okay, so now we've got all our 3D nodes set up. We're ready to kind of take a look at this in 3D space and start adjusting the positioning of all of those things. So let's go ahead and jump to our next lesson where we'll be adjusting the positioning of all these 3D objects that have our textures that have been